All right, so here's the scene I'm working with. I like the arrangement of rocks in the foreground. There's some nice shadows as well cast by those rocks. And then there's also distant land, which will help create a feeling of depth. I'll be painting over an old 11 by 14 inch painting, and I'll be using my usual limited palette. I've got cadmium yellow lemon, cadmium yellow medium, titanium white, burnt sienna, alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue, phthalo blue, and permanent red medium. Some people refer to this palette as a split primary palette because I've got a warm and cool of each of the primaries, plus titanium white, and I have added burnt sienna just because I like to sketch with burnt sienna. I also like to mix darks with burnt sienna, in particular mixing burnt sienna with ultramarine blue. Makes a really nice black color, and if I mix titanium white with it, it'll make a nice gray. So I find that a really useful color. So basically I've got 7 colors in titanium white. Occasionally I'll add guest colors, but it's been a long time. An example of a guest color would be something like dioxazine purple. But I don't find that I use guest colors very often anymore. Starting with a mixture of burnt sienna, cadmium yellow medium, and titanium white. I like to have little bits of orange popping through in my finished painting, but because I'm painting over an old painting, the orange will not show up unless I put some titanium white into it. Very confusing painting over an old painting, but it's a fun challenge and I'm often really happy with the results. All right, I've mixed up a dark here using burnt sienna, ultramarine blue, and I've added a bit of alizarin crimson. The first step is to get the shape of the rocks established. The dark rocks are the most prominent feature in the scene. So if I can get an arrangement of rocks that I'm happy with, the painting should work out. In the past, I've really struggled at this location. I think part of the reason is that I've painted the rocks too big. Like I zoomed in on them too much, and it didn't allow the viewer to see the rest of the scene. So I'm trying to make these rocks a little smaller this time. I am using a bit of medium. I'm using Gamblin's solvent-free fluid. There's a cliff to the left here, so I'm going to include that. And then the shoreline goes something like this. There's some more rocks in here. There's also a cast shadow from these rocks, and I want to have it intersect this rock here. So this rock is partially in shadow and partially in light, and then there are a bunch of rocks in this area as well. When I first started painting, I would often generalize and leave out little details, but I find that adding the details like these little rocks really makes a difference in the finished product. It makes it more interesting. All right, I've added some titanium white and a bit more ultramarine blue to the mix. This is for the distant land, and I did strike a line using a straight edge. It's really difficult to draw a straight line, so I always carry a homemade square that I made for that purpose. I'm using the same color for the white water that's in shadow. Painting over old panels really forced me to focus on shapes as opposed to painting things, which is something that we do when we first start painting. Painting is different from drawing in that it's almost like you're putting together a mosaic of shapes. There's drawing involved, obviously, in where you place things, where you place your shapes, and the shape of those shapes. Once you've got your shapes sketched out, it really is all about maintaining those shapes and building upon them, adding variations in color and value. I may need to adjust the size and shape of this rock or cliff to the left. It may just be too heavy and dark. So kind of sketching it in to get an idea of how it's going to look. For the sky, I'm starting with a mixture of titanium white and phthalo blue. There's actually quite a bit of yellow in the sky, especially around the horizon. So I'm going to keep this mix somewhat thin so that I can make alterations in color and temperature. I'm just focusing on eliminating this old painting so I can see where I stand and what I need to do. I'm using a natural bristle flat, number 8. All right, I've got a dark purplish gray for the wet sand that's in the shadow. Got a blue-green color here. I mixed up using phthalo blue, burnt sienna, titanium white. While mixing this color, I was paying attention to value because I want to make sure, got some saturation there. I want to make sure that it is light in value so that it appears like it's in sunlight, but then also dark enough so that the white water will stand out against it. And this area in here is mostly white water. It's starting to shape up. But I've added some cadmium yellow medium to my water mixture. There is more yellow in the water as it gets closer to shore. All right, I've got pure titanium white here. I mostly learned how to paint by reading painting books, and most of those books would say never use pure titanium white, but to be honest with you, there are times when I do, and it has worked out. And the bottom line is, if it works, it's right. Plus, keeping the titanium white pure is impossible. It's always going to pick up bits of color, adjacent color. So this first pass of white water is going to be a little bit dirty, but I do want it to be high in value. I think I want to add some hints of white water over here too. Still focusing on shapes, and then maybe have it come down over here like this. All right, these cliffs to the left are too light in value, so I'm going back and restating some of the darks. This time I'm using a mixture of ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson, kind of a dark purple mix. And I want to keep the edge of this rock or cliff really dark, and then I'll add some color on the inside here. There are actually quite a few warm tones on this cliff and in the rocks out here as well. I've switched over to a natural bristle flat number 6. I am squinting at the scene to simplify the shapes. All right, so I've switched over to a warmer dark, and this mixture is burnt sienna, a bit of titanium white, and cadmium yellow medium. I've also got a touch of ultramarine blue in there to gray it down a bit. All right, at this point I've stepped back about 10 feet. I'm just looking at the big shapes, seeing if there's anything that bothers me. So this is pretty much the block-in phase completed. And I'm not going to do that much more to this painting. All right, I've mixed up a warm white here using titanium white, cadmium yellow medium, and some burnt sienna. Might be hard to see, but I'm noticing some light in the distance. Always watching for interesting effects that happen, and then including them in the painting if I'm able to. There's also some waves coming in, sort of on an angle. There isn't any light out here, but I'm going to add it anyway. Now I've got a mixture of titanium white and cadmium yellow medium. The titanium white straight out of the tube has almost a bluish tone to it. It's kind of cool in temperature. So I'm coming over with a warm white to have the warm and cool white play against each other. When you have temperature shifts like that, it creates a feeling of light, or it helps to create a feeling of light, and obviously that's something I usually go for in my paintings, and I'm certainly going for that today. All right, I'm going back in and reinforcing some of those bits of orange. They didn't really last through the scrub in, and it's nice to get little pops of orange or some kind of warm color into the painting. It's a nice complement to the blues of the ocean and the blues of the sky. Adding some lighter, warmer tones in the shadows of these rocks here. Paying attention to value. I don't want to make these darks too light, and yet I'm aware of the fact that when I get this painting home, it's going to seem darker than it does right now. And that's just the nature of plein air painting. There's so much reflected light out here that all of the darks seem lighter than they will when I get them home. I decided to lighten the distant land a bit, just to push it back using atmospheric perspective. All right, so here's what I finished up with. This painting took just over an hour to complete. It was finished on site. I did end up using all of the colors on my palette for this painting, and I did not feel limited by my limited palette as far as the colors I was able to mix. My goal with this painting is the same as usual, to have a nice composition and a convincing feeling of light. So I did push the warm colors in the sunlit areas and then push the cools in the shadow areas. I did add back some relative warm colors in the cool colors of the cliffs and the rocks to have some variety of warm and cool within the shadow shapes. And I also try to do that in the sunlit shapes as well, have a mixture of warm and cool. For example, in the white water, I started out with the cool white and then it added warm bits over that. And I feel having the warm and cool colors playing against each other helps to create a feeling of light. I decided to do another painting. This is also an 11 by 14 painted over an old painting. I just turned around and looked the other direction. This is looking north up towards the Marin Headlands and San Francisco area. I tried painting this scene before, but I was not happy with the results. I am pleased with the way this turned out, and I think the reason is that I did a more zoomed out view of the scene and included a little bit of the sand, and the rock, which is to the left, or the group of rocks, is much smaller than I painted it in the past. So I'm still focusing on shapes, but I'm not having one big shape dominate the composition. All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you'd like to see some extra videos and help support the channel, there's a Patreon link down below. I've also put a tip jar down below. It's a PayPal tip jar. So that's another way to help support this channel and help keep me making these videos. It's much appreciated, so check it out. Other than that, stay creative. I'll see you guys in the next video.